That again to record it. Relationships can be pretty messy. Let me tell you guys a little story about when I was in high school.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. So senior year, I had this girlfriend who I was just totally over the moon about. Back in the dark ages. I was totally in love with this girl, right?
Oh boy.
So we started dating around Christmas time, which is like halfway through senior year. We were kind of like back and forth interested around Thanksgiving, but then around Christmas time we made it official, started dating. So right around March, we started thinking about, prom is on the horizon. And the year before I didn't go because I didn't have a girlfriend. My rule was always I went to dances stag. No matter what, even if I had a girlfriend, I went, stag means you go alone. Now, for example, in 10th grade, I had a girlfriend, and we went to homecoming together, but I met her there because I went stag. You get it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. That was just my rule. So, but now I had a girlfriend. I was pretty serious about it. We're getting ready to go to prom, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to break my rule. I'm going to ask her to, go to prom with me, which I thought, slam dunk. We're already dating. This should be easy.
She rejected you.
Turns out that when she was in 10th grade, she made a promise to her best friend, who was a guy, that no matter what, they would go to prom together, senior year.
That's messed up.
Thank you! That's what I said! Thank you! I was like, I won't tell her name, but I was like,
yes, tell.
Girlfriend, that's crazy! Like, we've been together for a while, what? She's like, no, I'm going with him.
Was he gay?
Not to my knowledge. No. I'm gonna go with no. So anyway, I went with my best friend who was a girl. We had a great time. It was awesome. Even though I hated high school, I really didn't like prom. We had a good time hanging out because we were friends. But
Josh.
I say all that to say, relationships are messy. That was a messy situation. The whole world of love, dating, relationships, marriage, it's all really messy. So what we have to figure out is, because relationships are necessary and we need relationships, we have to figure out how can we navigate through these relationships, these things that are ultimately messy. Because they're good, but they come with some messy circumstances. So they're a necessity. We have to have relationships, which we'll see here in a minute why. How do we work through them? So the very, very beginning of the Bible is a story about God creating everything, and he eventually creates a man. It says here, God called the dry ground land. He gathered the waters, and he called them seas. And God saw that it was good. Everything in creation he saw was good. It says the land produced vegetation, bearing fruit. It was good. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground. This is in Genesis 2. And breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. The Lord God said, it is not good. Everything else in creation was good. Then he gets to this one person. He's like, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Then it talks about how God created woman. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed the place up with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. I wish we had time to talk about this story because there's all kinds of really cool theological and other kinds of cool stuff in here, but we just don't have the time. So again, this is the story of creation, the story of how mankind came to be, man, woman. So he brings the woman to the man. The man says, whoa, man. Just kidding. Okay. The man said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and his mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. So, right off the bat, we're talking about a relationship. God sees that this man is alone. There's nothing else in creation that's like him. He says that's not good, so he creates a person for the man to have a relationship with. So relationships are important. You guys notice what Adam does as soon as he sees this woman?
Whoa.
Okay, no, I made that up. That was the Josh Lance paraphrase. He gets all poetic and stuff and romantic. this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. I mean, that's really kind of, I don't know. He like loses his head just from looking at this beautiful creature. Of course, we can't. We're not going to talk about sex tonight, but obviously, this passage talks about, marriage and sex. I mean, that is all a part of it. Okay, so I think this should tell us a couple of things. One, God is the designer of sex. He thinks it's a big deal. He's a big fan of it, but the key is to learn how to approach it from God's perspective. Since he is the creator of it, he is the one who came up with the idea, came up with the design, we should approach it not from our own standpoint, but from God's. And we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. So, this relationship, okay, God forms this relationship. We need relationships in our lives. The point of this story that we went through is to see that we were not meant to be alone. We were meant to have relationships. But the thing is that a lot of times we lose focus in thinking that a relationship, for it to have any meaning in our lives, has to be boyfriend-girlfriend, has to be kind of a sexual one. And that's not true. We can have meaning in relationships with a whole different bunch of kinds of relationships, friendships, with the relationships we have with our parents, the relationships we have with our coaches or mentors, youth pastor to student. We can find meaning in relationships that don't have to be guy-girl, sexually oriented, okay? We need relationships in our lives, healthy relationships that we can, again, friendships, all different kinds. But we have to realize that relationships are complicated. Again, they're messy. Sometimes, like when I started dating that girl, I was all excited, pumping my fist. And then when she was like, I'm going to prom with this other guy, I was like blaring my angry music, leaving school and punching my steering wheel. Totally happened. I'm not making that part up. I loved blaring my angry music when I was leaving school.
What song was playing? Making a statement as you squeal all over.
This was 2003. I'll have to look it up. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Because this is important to take time to think about this. I don't know. Anyway, let's just say it was loud and it was angry. So, relationships, like this says, relationships are complicated. Although it's not complicated to figure out why. When you take two individuals who are unique and you try and bring them together for whatever kind of relationship you're having, their different and unique personalities and strengths, weaknesses and desires come crashing together. And a relationship is all about finding that common ground with the person. Even though we're different, how can we relate? How can we find something in common and relate to each other? But it gets messy. It gets messy, especially in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It can get really extremely messy when you add in a whole sexual element of it. But besides that, relationships can be really messy. But again, they're an important thing. Okay, I'm going to skip over that. I want to talk about that. What we have next. Okay, so the things we need to keep in mind about relationships are sometimes there can be within the mess of a relationship. We need to figure out two things. Number one, when messes happen in relationships, is it because they are pushing us away from God? Any relationship that you have in your life that does not push you closer to God, I would strongly encourage you to think long and hard about keeping that relationship around. Because relationships were meant to lift us towards God. He is the one that created it. Friendship, parenthood, all that kind of stuff. And the purpose of it is for us to draw closer to Him. And when we have a relationship that pushes us away from Him, that is not good. And we need to seriously consider whether we should have that relationship around. Why did you just do that?
Because I wanted to, Josh.
Skip through. The other thing is that sometimes relationships can take the place of God in our lives. Now, I know that all of us are at different places in our faith journeys, but here's the thing. God should be in the number one, as far as relationships go, God should be in the number one spot in your life. Your relationship with Him should be the biggest deal in your life. he should be at the top. And again, we're all in different places. And some of us are very familiar with God and Jesus and all that stuff. Some of us are not, but this is something I want you guys to really think about. God should be the number one place in your life. In fact, this is the very first commandment. Exodus 20 verse 3 says, "You shall have no other gods before me." And if there's a relationship in your life that is first, like number one in your life, that is taking the place of God, and that is not good. This right here might be the most important thing you guys hear tonight. So this is our big idea for tonight. Unless I am wholeheartedly pursuing a relationship with Christ, with Jesus, all other relationships will be a hopeless attempt to fill that void. So not only did God create relationships between us humans, he created us to have a relationship with him, to have a friendship with him. And when we are not in that good relationship with him, then all of the other relationships in our lives try and fill that void that's inside of us. So our relationship with God needs to be the number one thing that we have in our lives. No relationship can take place of that relationship with God. You know, this idea is huge when it comes to love and dating and marriage. You know, some of us might be sitting there. I know there were times when I was in high school, again, this girl, there were times in high school I was just like, man, if I could just get this person to like me, if I could just get this person to go to prom with me, then my life would be complete. But that's not true. Even now, I mean, I'm married, and I love my wife. I like to say, I love to use this phrase, I love my wife like sharks love blood. Figure out what that means. Anyway, I love my wife, but she could never, ever, ever take the place of God in my life. Even though I love her and I rely on her so much, she could never save me from my sins. She could never save me from myself the way that God did. So even though I love her and my relationship with her is really important to me, my relationship with Jesus is even more important. And that needs to be where all of our minds are at when it comes to relationships. If we are not wholeheartedly pursuing a relationship with Jesus, all other relationships are going to be a hopeless attempt to fill that void.